This war is tearing apart every rule generals once relied on. Armored giants are now hunted like prey. Soldiers no longer advance in formation. They survive moment by moment under an unblinking eye in the sky. The battlefield has become a nightmare where movement means exposure. Concealment is fleeting, and survival depends on adapting faster than the enemy. What you're about to hear explains why the old way of fighting is already obsolete, and why the next phase of this war will be even more dangerous.
There are now 2 or 3 Russian soldiers running from one side of the street to the next side of the street with observation drones right over them from the Russians, and with strike drones either circling or on call as well. And that's the pace at which they are advancing also. Tanks, infantry fighting vehicles cannot survive on the battlefield anymore. So I don't know why we would not fight differently. Yes, we do have some capabilities that they do not have when it comes to long-range, again, missiles, cruise missiles, et cetera. Certainly we would use those. It's an open question as to how well the Russians would defend against those. My sense is that their air defenses are getting pretty frayed because they're having to stretch the impact of Ukraine's attacks on the refineries. They're way over 20% of the refineries now that have been damaged or destroyed. That is going to have an impact down the road as well if they can continue it. And again, keep in mind that you have this new Flamingo cruise missile that's about to enter the arsenal, and they're going to be making substantial numbers of those in very short order. That is a game changer.
What David Petraeus is describing is a harsh reality. Modern warfare is compressed into small units operating under nonstop surveillance, where detection is followed by precision strikes within minutes. Heavy armor no longer dominates the battlefield. It advertises itself as a target. Victory now belongs to the side that adapts fastest, projecting reach, speed, and sustained pressure far beyond the front line. And as critical energy infrastructure continues to be degraded, the strain on Russia's ability to sustain this war is only beginning to show. What you just heard explains how fighting unfolds on the ground, how technology, pressure, and rapid adaptation determine who survives and who doesn't. But wars aren't won with drones and missiles alone. They're also won with money, leverage, and allies willing to keep capital flowing when everything else is burning. And right now, far from the front lines, something has just happened that may have tore a hole straight through the financial backbone of Russia's war effort. Over the weekend, chaos didn't erupt on a battlefield. It exploded inside global geopolitics. In a move that stunned capitals around the world, the United States removed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro in a lightning operation and transferred him to New York to face serious criminal charges. The country he left behind was immediately thrown into uncertainty, with power struggles looming and the future wide open. But no leader is angrier about this than Vladimir Putin. For years, Putin had been quietly tightening his grip on Venezuela, not through loud alliances or flashy treaties, but through influence, weapons, energy deals, and long-term financial ambition. Now that entire strategy has collapsed overnight. One of Russia's most valuable political partners is sitting in a U.S. jail cell, and with him may have gone a significant portion of Putin's future war funding. The operation itself was swift, deliberate, and devastating. In the early hours of January 3rd, elite American forces carried out a pre-dawn mission in Caracas, masked by limited air activity used as a diversion. Maduro and his wife were extracted from their fortified residence as explosions echoed across the capital and other major cities. Within hours, it was over. The United States announced that Maduro was no longer in power and no longer free. American officials later revealed this was not an impulsive move. The plan had been months in the making, coordinated across multiple branches of government. The charges driving the operation were severe. Large-scale drug trafficking, weapons offenses, and allegations of running a criminal state apparatus that fueled instability and violence far beyond Venezuela's borders. Proof of life followed quickly. Maduro was moved first by sea, then by air, and delivered to New York, where he now awaits court proceedings. Legal debates erupted almost immediately, but geopolitically, the damage was already done. For Putin, this was a strategic disaster. Venezuela wasn't just another friendly government. It was becoming a pillar in Russia's effort to bypass sanctions, expand influence in the Western Hemisphere, and, most critically, tap into funding streams that could support Moscow's long war ambitions. And this wasn't the first loss. Just over a year earlier, another long-back strongman fell when Syria's leadership collapsed after a rebel takeover. 2 key partners gone in rapid succession. 2 regimes Putin had invested in wiped off the board. Analysts had warned this was coming. Even before the operation, Experts noted that if Washington truly committed to removing Maduro, Moscow was powerless to stop it. Distance, logistics, and limited leverage meant Russia could offer little more than words and aging equipment. That prediction proved brutally accurate. In the months leading up to Maduro's removal, Russia attempted to reinforce its influence. Technical advisors were sent. Weapons were supplied. Air defense systems were reportedly delivered. Transport aircraft flew into Caracas, following urgent requests for protection. But when the moment came, none of it mattered. The defenses didn't stop the operation. They didn't even slow it down. Caracas, the most heavily protected location in the country, fell silent as helicopters moved freely and strikes went unanswered. Russian-made systems that were supposed to shield Maduro failed completely. The message was unmistakable. Moscow could not protect its allies when it counted. That failure carries consequences far beyond Venezuela. Every country considering deeper ties with Russia just watched what happened. Russian equipment didn't deter the United States. Russian promises didn't hold. Russian influence evaporated in hours. For a leader who relies on arms sales and security guarantees to build loyalty abroad, that signal is devastating. But the real blow comes down to money. Trade between Russia and Venezuela wasn't massive, but it was growing rapidly, expanding across energy, transport, logistics, and pharmaceuticals. And behind it all sat one prize that mattered more than anything else: oil. Venezuela holds the largest proven oil reserves on Earth, nearly 4 times as much as Russia's. Hundreds of billions of barrels, much of it untapped due to sanctions and decaying infrastructure. For Putin, access to that oil was never about replacing Russia's own supply. It was about control, leverage, and future revenue measured not in millions, but in trillions. Russia had positioned itself as a critical supplier of the materials needed to process Venezuela's extra-heavy crude. When U.S. supplies were cut off, Caracas turned to Moscow. Shipments flowed. Dependence deepened. And with that dependence came opportunity. Future extraction deals, shared profits, and tax revenues that could quietly feed Russia's war machine. Then it all vanished. Just weeks before Maduro was removed, Russian shipments were already under threat from potential blockades. Now, with Maduro gone and Washington asserting control over Venezuela's direction, Russia's role has been erased entirely. Years of leverage collapsed in a single night. The scale of what was lost is staggering. Depending on market conditions, Venezuela's oil could be worth tens of trillions of dollars. Even a fraction of that would have transformed Russia's long-term financial outlook. Instead, Putin watched it slip away as the United States openly discussed moving its own companies in to rebuild infrastructure and profit from production. And the damage doesn't stop there. If Venezuelan oil floods global markets under new management, supply rises and prices fall. Russia, already forced to sell its crude at deep discounts because of sanctions, takes another hit. Lower prices mean less revenue. Less revenue means a weaker war chest. Every lost dollar tightens the screws on Moscow's ability to sustain the conflict. This is why Maduro's fall matters so much. Putin didn't just lose an ally. He lost credibility, leverage, future income, and a potential escape route from economic isolation. His carefully constructed soft power strategy was smashed with brute force. Still, there's a dangerous twist. Some analysts argue the Kremlin may try to weaponize this moment. The U.S. intervention gives Putin what he thrives on: narrative ammunition. He can point to Venezuela and argue moral equivalence, that powerful nations decide the fate of smaller ones by force. And that argument may resonate with governments fearful of becoming the next target. In that sense, Venezuela may be lost, but the fear it generates could still be exploited. Whether that gamble pays all depends on what happens next. If Venezuela stabilizes, holds legitimate elections, avoids chaos, and rebuilds transparently, Putin's argument collapses. If it doesn't, Moscow will seize on every mistake as proof that Washington's actions were no different from its own. For now, one thing is clear. With Maduro gone, Russia's war funding has been exposed and weakened. An ally is lost. A fortune has vanished. And Vladimir Putin is left staring at a future where the money, influence, and time he needs are all running out.